down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. It's an open mic night for photographers. Get ready for 60 minutes of your photography questions in real time with answers from your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, happy Monday. It is time for another TogChat. I'm Joe Edelman, your host, and tonight we're going to do all Q&A. I've had a bunch of people messaging me after the last couple times where I've done, the little tutorials in the beginning, and they've got lots of questions and they don't get them in and they don't want to do super chat. And you know what? That's okay. I want to try and answer as many questions as I can. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of have a lot of fun with the Q&As. Plus, every time I do one of those little 10-minute lectures in the beginning, it usually winds up being about something that just gets people's backs against the wall. And, then I have to deal with days and days and days of people that are all upset commenting. So, hey, how's everybody doing? I hope that you guys got out to do some, cool shooting over the weekend. Let's go ahead and get all the business stuff out of the way right away, and then we'll dive in. So as it has been for about the last month now, tonight's episode of TogChat is sponsored by the great folks at Hunt's Photo and Video in New England. You can find them online at huntsphotoandvideo.com. The link is in the description below the video, and I'm going to post that link in the chat window for you right here now so that you have it. Believe me, pretty much anything and everything that companies like B&H and Adorama have, these guys have, but one huge difference, and I speak from personal experience. Gary Farber and the folks at Hunt are incredible when it comes to customer service. So if you have questions, if there's stuff that you just need to talk to somebody and kind of talk out what you're thinking about doing, these are the guys to talk to. They really, really are. And if you live in New England and you're not actually going to their stores to shop, you're really missing out. You really are. So that's that piece of news out of the way. The second piece, you guys know that I ask you every week, please take a second and go ahead and hit that thumbs up and like the video. It would be greatly appreciated. That helps more people find the video on YouTube. And of course, subscribe. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, I am so close to that 100,000 mark, and I would really appreciate your help and support. And of course, social media. If you're not following me, hey, come on. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those are the places where I am most active. And you can also catch a lot of content there that I obviously am not able to post on YouTube. And of course, when the video's over, comments underneath the video, not the ones here in the chat window, but comments underneath the video are always greatly appreciated. Okay, so I lied. Two pieces of business. So let's get to the really, really important one. The video this week. The video this week, and in fact, here, I'll just stick it up on the screen. There it is, 10 awesome tripod tips and tricks. Make sure you check that out if you haven't watched it yet. The folks at fstoppers.com and also DIYphotography.net, they were nice enough to write an article about the video, but it's the first in a two-part series. So the deal is I recently decided to kind of grow up and be a big boy and actually get real tripods. I'm not going to lie, and I'm going to talk about this in the next video, the one that's coming out this week, so that's part 2, but I'll give you guys a preview. I've always been one of those guys that, I started out as a newspaper photographer, so you hardly ever use a tripod as a newspaper photographer. And then when I, became a studio photographer and started doing commercial work, I used it when I absolutely had to. Otherwise, I avoided it. So as a result, let's face it, tripods aren't sexy. So I always bought junk tripods. If it was cheap, that was good. Worked for me. And that's what I bought. So, finally, I'm at a point now, especially since I tether almost all the time when I'm in the studio, I realized I need to grow up and I need to get a real tripod. And actually what got this started wasn't the tripod, but it was the ball head. Guy by the name of David Battelle. He is the gentleman. You may remember his name from my video on the tether block. He's the inventor of the tether block. I had the good fortune of having David visit me at my studio a few weeks back. He's also the creator of a really cool piece of gear called the Digital a la carte case that I'm going to be doing a video on for you guys in a few weeks. But David showed me a ball head that he uses for all of his shooting. And David, by the way, he's the guy, if you've ever seen the Harley Davidson motorcycle catalog that comes out every year, that's his baby, okay? So this is the ball head that he uses, and it's by a company called Acratech. You'll be learning all about them in this week's video. So this thing not only is really cool, like it just looks cool, which is not the reason to buy it, but it is cool. We are talking an incredibly brilliant design. And I would have been the first to tell you, if you would have met me a month ago and asked me about ball heads or pan and tilt heads, I would have been the first to tell you ball heads suck. Go with a pan and tilt head. I can't stand ball heads. And I've got a whole list of reasons. I'll talk about them in the video. But what I wound up learning is the complete opposite. And literally today, you could not get me to go back to a pan and tilt head because I finally found the right ball head. The ball head that basically covered all of the objections I always had about ball heads. And it's just so easy to use. It's amazing. So that's going to be coming up. And I will, of course, talk to you about the tripod brand that I switched over to, which I paid for, by the way. I didn't get them handed to me. So I paid for these tripods because I did a lot of research. It was a brand that I settled on. And it was a combination of quality, features, and price, all three together. But I didn't cheap out. I also didn't wind up spending, $500 on a pair of legs and then having to buy a ball head on top of that. So I'm kind of, I would call it in the mid-range pricing for what I need, which was perfect. But that's going to be part 2 of the video. So hopefully you guys will tune in for that after, of course, you watch part 1, which is live on the channel. In fact, I will put the link here in the chat window for those of you that are with me live tonight. You can check that out. There's the link for that video. And then the last piece of business, and we'll dive into your questions. For the last, 2 months, I've been telling you guys about a contest that is sponsored by the folks at PhotoFlex. You know that I'm one of the PhotoFlex light leaders, which is an honor that I truly appreciate. So every week, PhotoFlex does a contest called Share Your Lighting. Hashtag Share Your Lighting, okay? And all you have to do is email 2 photos, 1 finished picture. And you can see an example on the screen here right now. Here we got this police officer, the canine officer with his dog and his truck in the background and, really cool mountain setting. So you submit a finished image and a behind the scenes image, just like you see here. You email that to tellus@promarkbrands.com. And I'm going to give you that email address also. So there's the email address for that. And here is also the link for PhotoFlex's Facebook page if you want to go check out some of the past winners. In the last 2 months, all but 2 of the winners have been members of my Facebook group. Now, I don't have any inside connections for that, but I'm really proud to say that a lot of my Facebook group members have been winning the contest. So this week's prize is a Muslim, like a 12-foot Muslim background. I think it's in black or gray. You get your choice. That's awesome for free. Oh, and the most important piece, gang, this is how cool PhotoFlex is. Because tell me how many other companies would actually do this. You don't have to use PhotoFlex gear to win the prize. Certainly that's a bonus. They'll love you for that. But all you have to do is show the finished picture and a behind the scenes image. And I would encourage all of you, because they will post the information, especially if you're members of my group, you'll understand this. You should include a little bit of detail about the shot, what you went through to do it, how you did it, etc., because they will post that image, and that way everybody learns. Okay? So I hope to see some more of you winning this contest, winning some cool prizes. If you're not a member of my Facebook group yet, here is the link to the Facebook group, and I hope to see you there. Be forewarned, when you ask to join the group, you're going to be asked 3 simple questions. 1, are you a subscriber to my channel? You better be. 2, what's your username? 3, it's going to ask you to promise, pinky swear, to watch the welcome video once you get into the group, because the group's a little bit different. So I'm not going to give you the whole sales pitch on it, but I promise you, it's a group where you can learn a lot of stuff. We avoid a lot of the kind of usual crap that goes on in a lot of Facebook groups. So if you're watching me now and you're following me on YouTube, I hope you will check it out, because it's basically a place where I am able to kind of continue the discussion that starts on YouTube, and we do it in the Facebook group. Okay? All right, gang. So let me switch my screen over here. So for those of you that are here, seriously, this is your night tonight. We got a whole hour of Q&A and a bunch of stuff to talk about already. A lot of folks were here early, already loaded some questions. So I'm going to start with some of those early questions, and then I will come back. So if I don't answer your question, the second goes in there. Don't think that I'm ignoring you. And usually when we do this, we've still run out of time for all the questions. So if you have a question that you absolutely need to get answered tonight, super chat, that little $sign down in the bottom left-hand corner of the chat window, that will get you an answer for sure. Even if I have to stay late, you can donate anywhere from $1 to $500. Better be a good question for $500, right? But just $1 will get you an answer for sure. Okay. All right, gang. So some of the early questions that I had tonight, and by the way, if you're wondering about early questions, obviously TogChat starts at 6:30 p.m. Indeed, tonight we had a couple people that were a little bit early because they are in places around the world other than here in the U.S. And in the U.S., we started daylight savings time this week, right? So, everything's off by an hour anyway, but the party usually starts about a half an hour early. So I usually actually begin setting up my machines here, my screens with all the windows that I need, because I run the board on this myself when I do these live feeds. I usually start setting up about an hour in advance of the show. So usually by 6 p.m. my time, I'm online and we're talking in the chats already. Okay. So, if you want to come in early, have a conversation, say hi, all that kind of stuff, I'm here. I talk, we type, and the conversation begins. So some of the early questions tonight. Oh, we got a super chat here for Andrea. So let's see. Just finished a photo shoot. The word of mouth seems to begin. Awesome, Andrea. Very good. And so Andrea happens to be an accomplished photographer, but also an actor, an Italian actor. So, he's a little irritating. I'm going to say this even though he's here because he used to live in Italy, in Rome. And so every time he would post a picture in my group, he would show us some exotic location in Rome. So given that he's an actor and also a photographer, he's just moved to the United States. He got his visa and he moved to the United States. And, it would have been one thing if he was living like in some dump in LA, but where does he wind up? He's in Santa Monica. So I get it. It's not quite as exotic as Italy, but still, I'm in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where it gets really cold. So I keep seeing all his posts from Santa Monica. Gosh. Anyway, so Andrea, I'm glad that word's getting out, and I will look forward to chatting with you tomorrow afternoon. Okay. So guys, here we go. First question I had tonight from Sergey. He is a hobbyist portrait photographer. As he puts in parentheses, i.e., I love taking pictures of pretty ladies. Don't we all? Come on, right? He doesn't need to make money with it. He's just doing it for fun. He's asking, can I give him any advice on finding new faces? He would normally go with friends or friends of friends, but he recently moved. He doesn't have any new connections yet. He's looked into the TFP groups in and around London, but there's barely any life there. Okay, so Sergey, you're kind of headed in the right direction. So if you don't have a lot of people that you know in the area, cool. We'll leave that off the list because honestly, that's one of the best places to start. TFP groups. The problem that you're going to have there, and when I say problem, it's not a problem as long as you are aware. Obviously, you're going to be dealing with a lot of amateurs and not necessarily people who are going to behave and operate in a professional manner. And by that, I mean everything from, showing up on time to following directions, all those kind of important things. Okay, so you run a little bit of a risk there. I do know in London, there is a platform that's kind of the European version of a platform we have here. Here in the US, which is also available in London, by the way, we have a platform called Model Mayhem, which is basically, it's kind of like Facebook for models and photographers would really be the best way to describe it. As a photographer, you go and you post a profile. It's free. They do have a paid version, but you don't need the paid version. You post a bunch of your images. More importantly, you're not doing it for people to find you. Please don't use social media to feed your ego. That is not the goal with any kind of social media or any kind of web marketing. So what you do is you go and you post a profile, and that gives you access to the search tools. So then you can search for people who have labeled themselves models and who are looking to get in front of a camera and pose. And you contact the people that you are most interested in. In Europe, and I believe it's UK based, but there's also a website called Purple Port. And Purple Port is basically the European version of America's Model Mayhem. So I'm pretty sure that in Europe, Model Mayhem is available in various places. So, but that's where I would encourage you to start. Begin there. So just to add to that, I see a statement here, Darko. You see that problem in Winnipeg with getting models to even show up when they promise. Darko, you must not have been following me for too long. So I'll give you the breakdown because I haven't talked about this in a while. When a model doesn't show up. Now, I'm going to put the word model in air quotes. Why am I putting in air quotes? I'm putting in air quotes because if you look in the dictionary, the definition of model, it's very similar to the definition of photographer. Nowhere in the definition of model or photographer in the dictionary does it say anything about making money or professional. A model is simply a person that poses for an artist, and depending on the dictionary, it will add the word photographer. Okay? A photographer is simply a person that takes pictures. So, that being said, as long as we are keeping that in perspective, 9 times out of 10, I can confidently prove when a model flakes, which is what all the photographers and the GWCs like to refer to it as, when a model flakes on a shoot that's been scheduled through Facebook or Purpleport or Book It or Model Mayhem or any of those, 9 times out of 10, I can track the problem back to the photographer. It's the photographer's fault, not the model's. And it's the photographer's fault because they planned the entire shoot by messaging system or text messages. They never actually had a conversation with the model. They didn't put any real effort into planning the shoot with the model. It's like, yeah, hey, you're hot. It'll be cool to shoot. Let's show up Saturday at 1 o'clock and we'll take a bunch of cool stuff. And then the model says, well, what should I bring? Oh, just bring a bunch of stuff and we'll figure it out when you get here. You know what? Those photographers absolutely 100% deserve to have a model no-show. Because those photographers have demonstrated that they are too damn lazy to put in the effort to ensure a great shoot. Every photograph that you guys have ever seen me display on my website, on social media, here on YouTube, not only has it taken a lot of work and a lot of pre-planning, but it has required the efforts of 2 to 3 people to make it happen. So it's a collaboration, okay? And Darko, if you had a pre-meet and she didn't show up, that's good because you didn't waste your time. You didn't waste your time on the actual shoot. But if you stick with me, Darko, maybe I'll get it tonight. We'll see if we have time. There are real simple ways that you can assure that a model will never flake. I routinely avoid using models from such websites as Model Mayhem, etc. However, here's the big however. When I teach workshops, I always hire one model from an internet website so that the attendees, the photographers who come to the workshop, can experience both sides of the equation. And the reason I do that is I want them to kind of see the difference. But even in that situation, I've never had a girl flake. I've never had a girl be a no-show. Never been an issue at all. Okay? It's all a matter of how you go about doing your prep. So we'll get to that. I promise. Okay? So Sergey, I hope that helps. Really just start, checking out some of these websites. The TFP groups in London, I don't know if you're finding those TFP groups through Facebook, but I will say that, and again, this is really not a whole lot different than Model Mayhem and Purpleport and the rest, but there are a lot of, model photographer groups on Facebook that are regional, so you would be able to find some that, are in London, etc. And I would encourage you even to, if you're not already a member of my Facebook group, Sergey, make sure you join the group because we have a lot of photographers in London in the group. So I'm sure that they would also be able to give you a little bit more direct feedback and maybe some more useful information to, to help you out there. Okay. All right. Next one from Michael Hardy. When mixing natural light and flash, whether it's strobe or speed lights, is there a sweet spot in terms of the ratio where it looks most natural? So this question came up before we started tonight, and Sven, who is a very loyal follower of mine and a good friend who's from the other side of the pond, he came back with an answer of some photographer whose name I don't know, but apparently the answer is 30%, which my response was, in case you weren't here, that's crap. Michael, the sweet spot in terms of the ratio, to make it look natural, it's going to vary based on tons and tons and tons of variables. So the problem with somebody telling you 30% or 20% or 10% or any of those things, I have to be honest with you, it's going to hang you up. It's going to hang you up big time. Okay. Anytime that you are working, here's the simple way you deal with this, because it all comes down to taste. Because here's the irony of it. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, how do I get it natural looking? And then when they go out and they do it, they still wind up overpowering the sun or the ambient light with the strobe, but they're really excited about it because they happen to hit a different sweet spot that really just kind of, worked for them and they liked it. So here's the thing. Basically, when you're going to do shots like that outside, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to set your exposure for the ambient light. In other words, if you want that background darker than the strobe, then that means you're going to be underexposing the ambient by maybe a stop, maybe 2 stops if you want really dramatic, whatever it is. Get your ambient set and get that exposure set. And then basically what you're doing is you're bringing the strobe up to the point where you want it to be. And my advice to you is experiment. It's simply experiment. I find, especially with new and young photographers, one of the downsides, and it is a downside, to all of the educational resources that we have available to us today. And I'm basically picking on me and everybody else that's out there on YouTube and the books and everything else. If you're willing to be lazy, you're going to go find a person whose work you like and who you trust, and they're going to say 30%, and you're going to run and do that. And that's like the gospel, 30%. No. Because number one, that hasn't taught you a thing. It's not teaching you how to see the light. It's not teaching you how to figure out where that ratio should be. And most importantly, it's letting you focus on a number. Your camera can't see and understand those numbers because those numbers, it's all subjective. It's all a matter of what does your brain and your taste like. So please don't let anybody tell you this is where it should be, or this is the right starting point, or any of that kind of stuff. Troy, thank you so much, man. I should go for a pizza. That sounds really good. I appreciate the super chat. Don't let anybody give you those numbers. Simply, when you're going to do that kind of stuff outside, okay, it's not as hard as you think. It's really not. Set your ambient exposure first. That's the great part about digital photography. There's no guesswork. There's absolutely no guesswork. There's never a reason to leave a shoot and have poorly lit or poorly exposed images, ever, because we can see it right away. So set your ambient light to the way you want your background and that to appear, and then start adding the strobe in and bring it up or bring it down until you've got the desired effect. I promise you do that several times over, Michael, you are going to be so much better off, so much more well-versed, so much more stronger, and so much more confident about working in that kind of situation. Michael, thank you so much for the super chat. You'll just be way ahead of the curve as opposed to letting somebody tell you a number. But that 30% number that was getting floated around, Sven's a good guy. Sven, I love you, but I don't know who this guy is that you quoted, but I right off the top of my head, that number just sounds like a really bad idea. So I encourage you, Michael. And Michael, by the way, what I just described to you is exactly how I do it. That's exactly how I do it. If I'm going to work outside with strobe, I'm setting my ambient first, and then I'm going to bring in my fill flash. And I will tell you, I don't do that often. Why? Because I love natural light. But if I'm taking a strobe outside, that's basically the way that I'm going to do it. Okay? Michael Hardy, thank you for the soda. All right. So, okay. So next one here. Benjamin Sutton. Any guides out there or just plain help with posing folks for a single person portrait or models? Crossing over from being landscape photography to portrait photography has got your photos looking stale. Okay. So now I'm going to give you some very controversial answers here, Benjamin, but follow along because I think that you'll understand they're coming with the right intention. Okay. When I started photography at a young age, I looked at a bunch of books on posing. I had a mentor who was a portrait photographer that was actually really, really good at doing all the traditional poses, okay? And we're talking traditional poses in the mid-1970s, right? But a lot of those traditional poses are still the same traditional poses today. They're not a whole lot different. So, and this was for portrait posing, by the way, not models or anything, but portrait posing. Pretty much from the time that I started learning those poses, I hated them. They seemed stiff. They seemed boring. Now, at the time, when I was in my teens and I was learning these poses, I kind of wrote it off as, well, okay, this guy was in his 40s. He's like an old guy. And so that's like old stuff. That's what I like wrote it off on. I didn't really understand that what was bothering me about these poses, and the air quotes are very important there because pose, it's a 4-letter word, right? Okay. So what was bothering me was the body language. It wasn't anything to do with it looking like too old. Ishmael, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. It wasn't anything to do with it looking too old or too stiff. It was the body language. Okay. So that being said, oh, Ishmael, I'll get to your question in just a minute. Okay. Thank you very much. I see the question there. So, years later when I started shooting models, I actually avoided any kind of books on posing at all. This was still pre-internet days. So yes, I'm from the dark ages. Okay. So I couldn't go to Google or YouTube. And I didn't have a mentor at that point. I was well underway in my career. So I looked a lot at magazines, but I never took a magazine to a shoot with me. So in other words, I never went with like this picture, with a page turned over like, oh, I want to do this. No, I would study stuff like that a lot. And then I would go and I would create things. I took a lot of really crappy pictures with a lot of really bad poses. But here's what I started figuring out pretty quickly because I was determined to get good at it. And I was trying very hard. I figured out that the key to posing was not posing. And I'm really serious. Like, that is the key to posing. So I have 2 ebooks that are going to be coming out in the spring of next year. They are already well underway. One of them is it's a book called Prep. Literally, that's the name of the book. It's called Prep, and it's all about how to prep for proper shoots, everything from portraits to working with models. But the other one is going to be, and this is a working title. I don't have a title yet. It's Joe's approach to posing, and it's based very, very heavily in body language and understanding body language. Posing is stiff. If you say the word pose to somebody, they will immediately stop moving. If you actually look up the definition of the word pose, it doesn't say anything about standing still like a statue anywhere. But yet that's what people do. That's what we are taught to do as a society. So hence that's what we assume a photographer wants. That's part of why you hear me use the term or the phrase all the time, don't use 4-letter words. Okay? Words like auto. Auto is the 4-letter word for forget about it. Pose is guaranteed make a person stiff. Okay? So my sincere advice to you, but I am going to give you the short answer, but I wanted to give my long answer first. My sincere advice to you is don't get the books. In fact, there is a video that I have that is, let's see here. It's one of my older videos, so it's kind of the really serious Joe. But let me switch this over. I'll show you the video so you can go look it up because I talk about this in this video. So right here, it's how to create modeling shots with energy. I did this video 6 years ago, so I will apologize in advance. It's ironic that I'm talking about creating modeling shots with energy, and I talk really serious like I'm doing a National Geographic monologue, okay? But as you can see in here, I talk about the idea that sometimes the best pose is no pose at all. Watch that video and keep practicing and keep failing, but paying attention. When you have a pose, as you say, it looks stale. Okay, so go back and look at those pictures and say, why? And look at why from 2 reasons. One, was it something that you maybe were doing or weren't doing with the subject that was causing them to maybe kind of disconnect? And 2, look at it from the standpoint of, okay, so this looks stale. What could I do to make it look not stale? Period. And then go try it next. The reason why I prefer that route, and obviously you'll get a lot more detail in that video. In fact, here, let me give you guys the link to the video in the chat window here. I can do that so that you guys have it. Whoops, let's try that again. There it is. Sorry, thought I had it there. Okay, look, there's the link to that video if you want to watch it. Most of the posing books, in fact, if you study posing like hardcore, you'll learn about C curves, S curves, all that kind of stuff. Here's the problem with that stuff. That stuff works great if your subjects are skinny. Well, I hate to tell you, like here in the United States, the average dress size that is sold for women is a size 14. We are a fat country. And I'm not trying to not be politically correct. And look, I'm sorry. Go to any doctor. Size 14, it is considered overweight and borderline obese. by medical professionals in our country. Okay, so I'm not editorializing. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just saying, so the problem is you take a size 14 person or the male equivalent of that, and you try to put them into C curves and S curves, they look like beach balls. It doesn't work. Okay, so it's much more important to focus on body language and emotion. Because number one, body language, or I should say, excuse me, back up, emotion drives body language. If the emotion is in the right place, the body language will follow, and it will look natural, and it will look relaxed. That's 10 times more important than the pose. Okay? So if you were going to say, I'm not patient enough to wait for Edelman to get his act together with his ebook, I need something now, I would encourage you potentially to look at some of the things that the photographer Lindsay Adler has published. She takes a fairly practical approach. So now again, I'm still maintaining my stance. I am not a fan of posing books. I know Lindsay. Obviously her work is top notch. So there's no question about the quality of her work. Her method of teaching posing, it is grounded in the traditional stuff, the stuff that I'm complaining about, but with a much more contemporary approach. So if you need somebody to get yourself kind of at least get the ball rolling now, and you're not comfortable with shooting and trying to work through it yourself, which I still highly encourage, then I would recommend go and look at some of Lindsay Adler's stuff. And I think that you will at least not be wasting your money or wasting your time, but I will still tell you that ultimately body language is the key. Learn to understand body language and identify body language cues, and then work on the psychology of your interaction between you and your subject, and you're not going to have to worry that much about posing. You're just not. Okay? All right, so Ishmael had a question in your super chat. Thank you, Ishmael. Again, the question was, and whoops, it looks like I missed the first part, so let me scroll back up. There it is. Is there a standard image size or pixels that I import images to deliver to the customers, or what should that standard be? And what if they ask for high resolution images? Should you handle those numbers in a different way? Okay, so Ishmael, here's the way to approach that. So first of all, if the client asks for high resolution images, that should only be occurring at one of two times, right? That should be occurring when they are contacting you to say, are you able to do this job? And you should be asking, do you need high resolution images? Or you've already done the shoot and they've come back to you later and said, hey, by the way, can we get high resolution images? So that says, if the question happens on the front end, you're going to say, sure, I can do that for a price. And you're going to build that into the cost of the job. If it happens on the back end, you're going to say, well, high resolutions weren't included in the job, but I can provide you with those for this price. And generally, there's no law, there's no rule. Generally, when somebody says a high resolution image, they're actually referring to a full res image. So in other words, it's the original pixel sizes that you shot, okay? If I'm providing images for like social media and things like that, I personally will basically size social media images at 1200 pixels on the longest dimension. So whether that's the height or the width, it's 1200 pixels. Why do I do that? Because that is the best average size for social media display today. That could change tomorrow or a week from now or 3 weeks from now. But today, 1200 pixels is the best average. Okay? So, that's essentially where I would approach it. But the most important thing, though, is you should be making sure that those discussions, whenever possible, are happening in advance of your shoot. Never leave that stuff up in the air so that the client comes back later and says, oh, wait. I don't want, little small images at 800 pixels. I need full res images. Well, there's no reason for a client to ever say that and have leverage on you unless you haven't done your pre-shoot work, which means having conversations with the client, outlining in writing. And in writing can be a detailed email, by the way. It doesn't have to actually be written. But in writing, what you're doing, what you're getting, what the client's giving you in terms of, money, trade, whatever, but that should all be spelled out in advance. So anytime that you are at a point where you're referring to people as clients or customers, that means you're at least trying to work professionally. So you should be doing all that work in advance. If you're not having those discussions in advance, you are pretty much setting yourself up to be taken for a ride and abused in the process, because and you, at that point, when you start saying, oh, it's going to cost this, it's going to cost that, then the problem you have is, the customer comes back and says, wait, I had no idea you were going to say that. You never mentioned that. And you've basically created a bad customer experience. So the phrase is set expectations. Never pick up a camera and press the button unless you are confident that you and your client or you and your subject are on the same page with expectations. Otherwise, you're just asking for problems. Okay, so I hope that helps. I mean, those are the numbers I work with. It's either full res or 1200 pixels is pretty much what I do most of the time. So Benjamin, thank you so much, man. I mean, really, if I'm going to give you the tough love, Benjamin, just keep shooting, man. Keep shooting, but take the time to evaluate your work. Watch that video. You don't even need to wait for my ebook. You really don't. But if you are impatient, and I can totally respect that, look at Lindsay Adler's stuff. She's got some nice stuff, and I know she's done some things on Creative Live. I'm pretty sure she's got a book or two. I think they're ebooks, but she's got stuff that she's done on posing. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. We teach very differently. I will forewarn you, we teach very differently. We approach things differently, but she is a very detailed teacher, which is something that I like and respect. I mean, it's important if you're going to try and teach people to try and give them as much of the information as possible. Lindsay is one that, she doesn't hold back a lot. If she's not going to tell you something, it's an oversight, which is kind of my approach. I'm going to try and give you every angle that I can think of to save you from, making mistakes along the way. So it's a big part of what I love about the way that she teaches. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Keith, just getting into speed lights. This was another one of the early questions. And I know there's some new ones here, guys. Keep going, but type those questions in there. I'm going to start scrolling back through here in just a minute. I've got 3 more real quick ones, and then we're going to go back through this chat window. So Keith asks, just getting into speed lights, can I recommend a decent mount for attaching soft boxes to them? Keith, that's a wild card question. And what I mean by that is it depends on the brand that you're using and also what type of modifier. So what I mean by that is, for example, I use LumaPro speed lights. Well, LumaPro happens to make a really nice, modifier bracket that will allow me to mount 2 LumaPro, or any 2 speed lights for that matter, in the bracket, and then attach soft boxes, beauty dishes, you name it, okay? If you're just using umbrellas, all you need is a simple little adjustable umbrella mount that's basically going to have a stand mount and a 1/4-20 thread, drop in at the top for a spigot. And it's got a little umbrella spot where you slide the umbrella through and tighten it down. They're all decent mounts depending on what you want to do. I mean, literally. So it sounds like you're maybe just getting into working with modifiers with speed lights. So actually what I would encourage you to do, you can do a couple things. The self-serving one, go back and watch a lot of my videos where I do speed light work, because then you'll see a whole bunch of different mounts. That's one version. But maybe a quicker one is actually go to like B&H or Adorama's websites. And if you type in speed lights and then start looking at the accessories or even speed light mounts, you're going to see all the different options. And you will find, if you pay close attention, in many cases there's a brand name that you're maybe very, very familiar with, and it's kind of expensive. And especially you'll notice this at Adorama. And then there may be like their own brand, which would be a brand like Glow or Flashpoint or one of those, which is much less expensive. And even at B&H, you may find a very expensive brand like a Manfrotto type mount, but then you'll find a company called Impact, which is like a third the price. I will tell you from experience, the Impact mount is every bit as good as the Manfrotto mount. So do you need to spend that kind of crazy money? No. Manfrotto, much like Westcott and some of the other companies I gripe about, Manfrotto makes great equipment, but some of it is ridiculously overpriced. So, it's all about finding that balance. But actually, it's a good way to, kind of dream. I think I just got rid of it. I had the B&H catalog here. Another great way here. Let me see if I still have it. Aha! I haven't emptied the trash yet. Here it is. So, if you're in the U.S., okay, the B&H catalog. If you go into the B&H catalog, they always have a whole section that is just mounting stuff. And of course, now that I'm doing this in real time, I'm not going to find that section. But there's always like a full grip section in there. So depending where you're at in the world, you can probably go to the B&H website and ask to have one sent. I'm sure that they will gladly mail them out. But it's also a great idea just to get a sense of what kind of mounts are out there. I would caution you about letting somebody tell you, oh, buy this mount. Only because while they're not necessarily giving you bad information, they're telling you what works really best for them. There are literally thousands of options out there. Thousands. Okay. So definitely look around, because the key to grip gear, so mounts and stands and all that kind of stuff, that's called grip gear. The key to grip gear is actually not what's best. It's what's best for the situation you're going to work in. In other words, it's what solves the problem. What is going to allow you to mount stuff safely and securely, but allow you to also work efficiently. That's what you're looking for with any kind of grip gear. That's really what the priorities are. Okay. Felix Leclerc asked, any thoughts on when medium format will come back to the average working photographer? Gosh, Felix, you know what I want to say? I want to say, who cares? That's not nice, right? It's not. So, Felix, I would argue that it hasn't left. In fact, I would argue that it's been here. I mean, we've already seen plenty of bench testing that's starting with like the Nikon D810, and I forget which Canon model it is, so I'm not trying to diss Canon, gang. I just don't follow the Canon models. They were putting out medium format quality. You know, we've got cameras like Phase 1. So if you got an extra 60 grand floating around, go buy Phase 1. It's here. But you ask, you know, when's it going to come back for the working photographer? Digital technology in terms of clarity and image quality is so far ahead of film. I don't see medium format being that big a deal. The photographers that have an actual need for medium format, they're shooting medium format. They're working and they're shooting medium format. So I would argue that medium format is here for the working photographer. I don't know how old you are, Felix. It kind of sounds like maybe you're like my generation, and you're looking at the idea that, yeah, back in the 70s and 80s, you know, the high-end guys, they all shot medium format because you wanted that bigger negative. There's no need for that today. With the technology we have and the quality of, heck, you can go pick up a Micro Four Thirds camera with a small sensor and beat the bejesus out of what you did with medium format film. So, you know, I don't, me personally at least, I don't see that being a factor or need. I believe it's already here for the working photographer. Phase 1, Amaya, you know, Hasselblad, they've all got digital backs, all that kind of stuff. So I think Pentax has one. So it's really kind of not an issue. Troy's got a question. So Troy happens to be one of my Patreons, which, by the way, if you are able, check out my Patreon page. Okay. We do a bunch of stuff there, but most importantly, every Friday night, we use the Zoom technology, which is basically like a chat room, but it's a audio-video chat room. And we have Zoom meetings where all of my patrons are able to log in, and we basically get to hang out for hour and a half every Friday night and talk and chat and solve problems and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So this past week in Zoom, one of my patrons was planning a shoot with one of the contestants from the TV show The Voice this weekend. So we spent some time kind of troubleshooting and helping him plan for it. Most of my patrons don't even know this, but I have another patron who happens to be based in LA and does a lot of work, both lighting and production for the Today Show when they're on location in LA. And he was with us in the Zoom chat, but he wasn't able to talk because he was working. He was on a set, and we kind of kept asking him, like, what are you doing? But he couldn't talk because he was in the middle of getting ready for an interview. He messaged me afterwards, so even my patrons don't know this yet. Had we stayed on Zoom a little bit longer, we would have seen him working with Elton John and Matt Lauer. So he was actually on set setting up to do lighting and everything for an interview with Elton John and Matt Lauer. So that's just a little bit of what happens in our patron Zoom chats. But so Troy happens to be one of my patrons, and his question is, if he winds up having to give up Nikon, where would I say to go? So he's been having major problems with repair on his camera, and He's been getting the runaround from, I think, 2 different companies that Nikon uses for service on their lower end prosumer cameras. So, honestly, Troy, and obviously I'm very familiar with Troy, the work that he's doing, et cetera. My advice to you, Troy, would actually be, number one, because I know you will, not to get hung up in all of the crazy stats and all the debates out there today about megapixels and dynamic range and all that stuff. You're at a point, Troy, where you need to shoot and you need to shoot and you need to shoot. Now, I realize you want to have, a camera that's going to allow you to do that decently and it's going to allow you to grow. But I will tell you all this, and I'm going to be a little bit coy about it, only because the decision hasn't been made entirely, but it's really close. I would say 90% of the way there. I am probably going to be ditching Nikon very soon. I'm not going to Sony, so don't get all excited. It definitely will not be Sony, and no, it won't be Canon. So you guys can start doing the math and you can start wheedling things down from there. And I will tell you more as we get closer, and I will give you all the reasons. But I've done a lot of soul searching lately, literally, about my photography, about what I teach, about the way that I teach it, about the value systems that I want to try and share with photographers to be able to help photographers and to really make sure that I'm having a positive impact on the photographic community. And the short version is, which I'll talk about this much, much more as this moves forward. As a community, we are out of control when it comes to gear and priorities regarding gear. And trust me, gang, I like toys as much as anybody. If I was sticking with Nikon, I'd be wishing I could, step up to the Nikon D850 and that. It's a beautiful camera, all that kind of stuff. Yes. But, in fact, here, I'll give you guys an example. Let me switch my screen back. I posted this picture on my Facebook page this past week. This shot right here, this was done with a Nikon D200. This was taken a bunch of years ago, okay? It's a Nikon D200, which was a 10.2 megapixel camera. Now, right after I posted the shot, I had someone decide that, they were going to do the know-it-all thing, and they posted, oh yeah, anything looks good at 72 DPI on a website. So I responded by posting a snapshot of a 16 by 20 print that I have of this hanging on my wall in my studio. And it's a gorgeous image at 10.2 megapixels. And so the bottom line is, gang, all these megapixels that everybody worries about, all this dynamic, range stuff that everybody's worries about, everything, it's out of control. It just simply is. It boggles my mind. And so here, I'm going to get the Sony fanboys all upset. Guys, I'm not taking pot shots. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. It boggles my mind how many people have the A7R2 and are going to run out and buy the A7R3 because it's the best. And when they talk about, and I'm not going to get into any names, but it's even on YouTube. Some of these guys, when they talk about why they want the A7R3 compared to the R2, they're going to go spend that $3,000 or more than $3,000 for a couple small convenience features. Literally, because they are small convenience features. And that's all it is. Because the simple reality is, if you look at the work they're doing now, this A7R3 is not going to make a damn bit of difference in their work. Not zero. None. Their pictures are going to look exactly the same post A7R3 as they look now. So they're going to spend that $3,100 because it's the latest, greatest, and it has a few convenience features. So, for me, I just realized that, honestly, I get really stressed out talking to people about this equipment stuff because I've also come to learn that, for some, and that's why I started that geartographer phrase, some people are really simply into the gear. That's where their pleasure comes from. And so to those people, then I have no right to say, you should or shouldn't be doing whatever. So, but for me, I realized that it's about the process. It's not about the gear. So I will tell you this. I am looking at mirrorless, and it's not Fuji. So that's what I'll tell you. If you are a patron of mine, you already have a hint in what direction I'm going because I've talked about it. But again, it's not a done deal. I haven't gotten rid of my haven't gotten rid of the Nikons yet. The Olympus that's in the background, Linda, is one of the cameras I'm testing. Yes. So not a done deal yet. But I will tell you this. Wow, sharp eyes, Linda. Very good. This is the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II. It's a 20 megapixel and change camera, micro four thirds. I have been using this camera for 3 days. And I rented this, by the way. I want to be really clear. Like, I actually paid for a rental on this camera. This is with their Pro lens, the 12 to 40 millimeter, which is the equivalent of a 24 to 80 millimeter. Okay. And basically, this puppy rocks. Like, rocks. I'm not going to lie. Image quality, off the charts. Autofocus, amazing. Yesterday afternoon, I chased my 3-year-old grandson around an open field for about an hour, shooting, just nonstop. Set this thing on eye tracking mode. Was holding the camera just by the grip, and that had the the flip out viewfinder set up so that I could hold it down at his level and just kind of run around with it and shot. And I'll tell you what, damn near every frame perfectly in focus. It was incredible. I've used it in the studio, gotten outstanding results with it already. And the point is, I can put it right next to work that I'm doing with the Nikon D810. And it looks exactly the same. So I don't know for sure that it's going to be Olympus. The folks at Olympus, I've reached out to them. They are being kind enough to actually lend me a full kit to test out for a month. And so I'm going to do that. In fact, I'll be picking that up tomorrow and checking it out. But you guys know that I have the Panasonic GH5 and the GH4. Both also cameras, very, very impressive. The GH5 does great still work. I want simple. That's what I want. I don't want all the bells and whistles. I don't want all the crazy features that just jack up the price but don't actually impact my photography on a day-to-day basis. I want a camera that I can pick up and it just works. And it's simple and it's easy. And where all of the advanced features that I don't need don't get in my way. So far, that Mark II, it's looking pretty good. I am extremely, extremely impressed with the camera. So I had a lot of you know the gentleman by the name of Gavin Hoey, who, if he's not listening tonight, I found out, which is really cool. I found out at Photo Plus, he listens to my TogChats, usually while he's editing. And I had the wonderful experience of having a really, really lengthy discussion with Gavin at Photo Plus, and talked a lot about Olympus. He's an Olympus user, and also watched his presentation at Photo Plus, where he was working real time with a model, really kind of in a run and gun type setup with one strobe and a model in front of a large group of people shooting, and just absolutely some incredible imagery that he was creating on the spot. So yeah, so I'm ready for a change. Nikon is not giving me any sense of confidence that they are going to give me the camera that I'm looking for, which has to be a mirrorless. It's got to use my existing lenses if I'm going to go to a Nikon mirrorless, and already it looks like there's going to be an adapter situation or a really small line of lenses, that kind of stuff. So yeah, kind of it is what it is. Irene's here too. Hi, Irene. How you doing? So yeah. So I mean, we'll see. That's something I promise you guys. I'll be reporting to you a lot more on. But Troy, the reason why I told you that whole story now, because I really was going to hold off on telling people about this. Don't automatically go looking at the big expensive stuff, man, because you need to, you need to really concentrate on shooting. So monkey brains. enough with the rambling. Dude, if you don't like it, go find another live stream, man. Okay? I'm talking to the people here that are supporters of mine, that are regulars of mine. Sorry that you're not happy with it. Okay? All right. So, just so happens we are done, but that's the point. You know, I'm not here to put up with that kind of crap. Okay? So, let's see. Tom Cooper, I read somewhere the purpose of the camera is to get out of the way. The photographer kind of speaks to your comments. Yeah, I mean, that's really, that's what I'm after, Tom. And I got to tell you, from what I've seen so far, whether I change or not, because I'm not getting paid to change. So, you know, let's be straight. Olympus is hands down highly underrated and undervalued in terms of how these cameras work and what these cameras can do. I've been very surprised, very pleasantly surprised, because I'll admit, I never gave Olympus much thought. There have been a few things that have happened over the last couple of months, people that I've talked to that have kind of kept pointing me in that direction just to say, go look, try it out. And I've been extremely impressed, really have been. So let's see here. Thomas Palmer, yeah, chat goes crazy all the time. So EMB, Olympus isn't on rocky ground at all. No, I hate to tell you. Olympus actually, much like Nikon, but in a more profitable way, Ian. Olympus also does a lot of medical and scientific equipment. That's a big part of what they do. And by the way, one of the other like little bonuses, this is not the reason why I'm going to switch. I live 15 minutes from their corporate headquarters, like literally 15 minutes from their corporate headquarters. I drive past it on average 2 or 3 times a month. So, so let's see here. Let me back up. Where are we at here? Monkey Brains, what do I think about Jason Lear saying you're jealous and that's why you criticize him? Monkey Brains, you know, obviously you're here just to stir shit up. So I'm going to guess either you are Jason or you're a friend of Jason's or something. I don't know that Jason said that. If he did, hey, you know, good for him. I'm not jealous of Jason. So, you know, whatever. Okay. Let's see here. Heidkin, I'll not just switch from one brand to another because of the lenses you own. And honestly, you know what? That's a huge consideration for anybody when it comes to like switching brands. I want to be really clear. You don't just switch brands for the sake of switching. And you know, I've been a Nikon user for 37, 38 years. I took a 1.5-year break and I used Sony and came back to Nikon. So this is not something that you do lightly, and I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that. This is a move that will ultimately cost me money, but it's a move that I'm looking at that's going to position me where I want to be, working with the kind of gear that I want to be, and you know, in looking at Olympus and where they're headed with their gear and the kind of stuff they're doing, they're building cameras that work the way I want to work. This camera, for as small as it is and its weight, it's got a nice solid feel to it. It's metal, and it feels like metal. Even the lenses have metal rings on them. There's no rubber. There's no plastic. They're solid. They're well built, really intuitive layout. I've heard people complain about the menu system on Olympus, and so far, I got to be honest with you, I think the menu system on Olympus is easier than any of them. I think it's easier than Sony's. I think it's easier than Nikon's. So, you know, maybe people complain about it because they think it's not intuitive. To me, it's super intuitive and really, really easy. The only thing that I don't want to call it difficult, but and every camera manufacturer does this, you know, they call certain things a little bit differently than some of the other manufacturers do. So, of course, there's that language curve that you have to adapt to if you're going to change brands, but that's no different than if you go from, you know, Nikon to Sony or vice versa. But, so anyway, so that's the deal on that. So let's see, Dave here. When I can create better images than professionals, do amazing work with the same camera I have now, consider getting something better. Until then, it's me, not the camera. Yeah, I mean, it is, Dave. You know, good pictures come from the photographer. So, and Cedric, I will tell you, if you're thinking about something better for video, the GH5 is a beautiful camera. I have not had a chance to play with the video yet on the Olympus. I've read good things about it, but indeed, if we look at the bench tests that are out there, the GH5 does seem to come up, you know, a little bit better. So, let's see, Gil, we're all wondering now, lots of us are soul searching because of the crazy cost. That's a big piece of it, Gil. I got to be honest with you. You know, the cost of cameras and where everything is headed. And then when you take a step back and you realize that you're paying for a lot of stuff that you don't really use, you have to, at some point you have to kind of say, stop the madness. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. So, and believe me, a lot of people are going to think that I'm an idiot. And I'm really not concerned about that. At the end of the day, I'm going to produce the same kind of pictures that I do. I'm going to continue to be a photographer. I'm going to continue to shoot. And all of my experience with it so far, which has only been 3 days of shooting, don't get me wrong. That's why I'm, going to take this loan that the Olympus is willing to give me and try it out for a month. But in my 3 days of shooting, I've run it through quite a few different scenarios. And at no point have I felt limited by it at all. And looking at the results that I've gotten, I definitely don't feel limited by it. So, so let's see here. Where are we at? I know there were some questions back here. Bagram Blackjack, how if you buy a used camera, how many camera clicks are too many? Here's the thing about shutter actuations. I would not get too stressed about shutter actuations. If you're worried about that, so let's say you find a camera and it's rated for, on pretty much every digital camera that's out there, DSLR, you can find, if you Google it, you'll find what the expected shutter activations are for that camera. And that information comes from the manufacturer. So I'm just going to pick round numbers to keep it easy because I suck at math, okay? So let's say the camera is recommended for 100,000 activations. And you find one for sale. It's a really good price, but it's already got 90,000 activations. Well, that's saying basically you take 10,000 pictures, the camera may break. Well, okay, let's be real. First of all, you could take one picture and the camera could break. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get 100,000. There's no warranty that says that. That's number one. Number two, talk to most people. Most people will tell you that the cameras go well beyond the estimated or expected shutter actuations. Number three, the question you want to ask, if you're not sure, contact the manufacturer. In other words, go to their website, look for their phone number for their service section, call their service department or send an email and say, hey, what does it cost to replace the shutter in this camera? So as an example, I believe the Nikon D810, and please forgive me if my numbers are off a little bit because a lot of you are going to be able to go Google right now while I'm talking, okay? But the last I heard, if I remember correctly, you can replace the shutter mechanism in a Nikon D810 for somewhere between $300 and $400, okay? So if you find a used model, what you have to do is, if you're worried about that number being high, in your mind, add, let's say, $350 to the price. In other words, assume that you may have to pay for that repair, right? And then ask the question of yourself, is that total price a good price? If it's a good price, buy the camera. Worst case scenario, you get 10,000 frames, you replace the shutter, but you're still ahead of the game in the total cost. So for pretty much all the DSLRs out there, shutter replacements are fairly simple repairs in the eyes of the manufacturers, okay? And they're not super expensive. You're paying more for the parts than you are for the actual, replacement. So simply do that research. If you find yourself a used deal and you think it's a good deal, do the research, you'll be good to go. David Fox, iPhone X. I just ordered my iPhone X yesterday. Just ordered it. So it'll be a couple weeks, but just ordered it. So Ishmael, do I think using an image of your 2-year-old daughter on your business cards would look somewhat unprofessional or too personal? What's my personal opinion? Well, it only looks unprofessional if the picture looks unprofessional. If the photograph of your daughter is truly a great shot that truly sells your work, go for it. That's fine. But, and here's the big but, it's your 2-year-old daughter, which means that you are probably not the best judge of how professional is that image. Because obviously, in your eyes, your 2-year-old daughter is the most amazing thing in the world. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. But that has a dramatic impact on your perception of that photo. So my sincere advice to you would be maybe share that image with someone that you consider a mentor or someone that maybe has, even just some marketing or business background to see if they have the same experience. Because remember, once you show a picture to the world as the photographer, you have no control over how other people perceive that image. At that point, we release that to the world and it is what it is. So I would just make sure that you're being, completely honest with yourself about whether or not it's truly a marketable image on your part. Okay. All right. So let's keep scrolling here. LeVar, in a controlled studio environment, do I prefer strobes or speedlights or continuous lighting? For the most part, I'm a strobe person. In fact, you see me use speedlights in a lot of my videos, and it's strictly because of YouTube. And I'll tell you why. It's kind of a dumb little thing, but hey, if it helps people, I'll do it. When I started doing this YouTube thing, I used strobes all the time. Every time I would post a video where I talked about my lighting, people would immediately start commenting, can I do the same thing with speedlights? Can I do the same thing with speedlights? And of course the answer is yes. Then when I started doing some stuff with speedlights, nobody with strobes would comment and say, can I do that with strobes? So what did I learn? I learned that, okay, people with strobes have advanced enough in lighting that they understand, yeah, if you can do it with a strobe, you can do it with a speedlight. People with speedlights tend to be beginners because indeed that a speedlight is frequently the first flash that people buy. So, you know, they haven't made that transition mentally yet in terms of the learning curve. So my preference is absolutely strobes, but you'll see me shoot probably more with speedlights in the videos now so that beginners can connect better with what I'm doing, but I would say strobes. Adam Art, I did not change the time. We changed the clocks to daylight saving. So we did. Our clocks went back an hour this week. So the eastern part of the U.S. where I'm at now, we used to be UTC 4. We are now UTC -4. We are now UTC -5 for the winter. So that was the change. So all right, what else do we have? Thomas Palmer, what do you think about deep umbrellas? If you want a big one, more than 1 meter 50, it's the only option. I'm not a big fan of the deep umbrellas, but let me explain why. I'm obviously, they're very popular, okay? Especially if you're talking like the big parabolic umbrellas that have, you know, like the softbox front to it and that kind of stuff, Thomas. They are very popular. Now, I'll be honest, I think that sometimes they're popular because they look cool. People won't like me saying that, but I do, okay? For me, I avoid them because, as you know, you've probably seen the video of my home studio. I'm not working in a massive studio space. So I want stuff that is going to be a little bit more suitable for the space that I'm working in. And I do use the room, the walls, the white ceiling. I do use those as part of my lighting scheme. In other words, they are essentially modifiers for me as well. So, you know, they are a part of how I light, how I approach a shot. You know, so I'm not a big fan of them. So, Mark, whatever happened to the intern you were supposed to have for the summer? She did not last very long, but that's a story for another day, another time. So, Jacob, umbrellas are not my thing. No, I'm a softbox guy, Jacob, and I do talk about that in the videos. I do a lot of videos with umbrellas, and I talk about how much I love the shoot-through umbrella, because I encourage people that are just starting with lighting. In fact, I aggressively encourage people that are just starting with lighting, start with a shoot-through umbrella. I think it's one of the easiest and simplest lighting modifiers to learn with. So I do use the shoot-through umbrellas a lot in my videos, but now I'm a softbox guy. My favorite softbox in the world is that PhotoFlex medium softbox. It's, was it 24 inches by 30 inches or 32 or 34 inches? I think it's 24 by 34, something like that. Love that softbox. Like that's the perfect size for me. And then my second favorite is that 5 foot, the 60-inch Octadome that I use from PhotoFlex. Those are hands down my two favorite mods. But as you see in the YouTube videos, I frequently will go with the shoot-through umbrella because, again, I want to create stuff that people can connect with easily and that beginners can pick up and use and actually make good light with. So that's why I do that. Okay. Tim, great. I'm glad that helped out. Thank you. Thank you for the support, man. Douglas Sanchez, umbrella or softbox for speedlights? Douglas, actually refer back to the answer I just gave Jacob. It really depends on your comfort level, what you want to do. It's not about a speedlight. It's just a light is a light is a light in that regard. So it doesn't matter if you're putting a strobe or a speed light in it, you know. So Jacob, PhotoFlex refers to it as the medium. I think it's the medium light dome here. If you give me 1 second, I will find it for you and I will show you, and I will paste a link in here. Okay, Cosmin, thank you so much for the kind words, man. I really appreciate it. So let's see here. Let me switch over, Jacob, and I'll find you this box that I'm talking about. The Light Dome Medium. This is like hands down my favorite softbox in the world. Okay, so there's the link for that, and then the other one that I mentioned is the 5-foot Octadome, which this is big. So in fact, I see here Jay Joyce talking about, you know, no room in a tiny basement. It is tough to work with. I actually, you know, I only have, my ceiling is just under 8 feet in my home studio, the one that you see in the video that's on my YouTube channel. So yeah, I mean, this is a big modifier, but I absolutely love this modifier. It's just gorgeous light, so much that you can do with it. And it's simple. You guys know I like keep it simple, stupid. This is really, really simple to work with. So anyway, Jacob, those are our 2 links that you have there. PhotoFlex stuff you can buy it like at Amazon. You can get it at, you know, B&H, Adorama, Hunt's Photo and Video also. So it's, you know, pretty readily available. So let's see here. Ishmael sent the business card image via Facebook. Okay, I will take a look at it for you. So Chip O'Neill, shoot Olympus in studio with controlled lighting situations. It's fine. It lies a little bit with limited light. Chip, I hate to tell you, so does Canon. Canon sucks in low light for autofocus. Whenever I have workshops in my home studio, I have to add supplemental light during the workshop for the people with Canons to be able to focus, because if I light the room the way I normally light it, their cameras can't focus. That's not that big an issue, especially not with, you know, working with modeling lights and that kind of stuff. So for me, at least, I don't have a problem with that. But that's not an Olympus issue. I want to be really clear. Any camera, even a Sony, will lag in poor lighting conditions when it comes to the autofocus. But indeed, some are better than others. Absolutely. Okay. So let's see here. Fail and conquer. I'm in the opposite place, wondering if your near-decade gear has taken you away from where the market is and really limiting you, or if it's all in your head and you're just lying to yourself and wanting new features. Well, you know, obviously fail and conquer. I don't know what gear you have. It could be both, okay? And what I mean by that is simply really what you have to ask yourself. I mean, if you want to be honest, because obviously, hey, we all like the latest and greatest. I love toys, guys. I mean, that A7R3, be clear, it's a beautiful camera. It's absolutely a beautiful camera. But it's not going to make better pictures for people that are using the A7R2, okay? It's just not. It's going to give them some convenience. At a bench level, if we're doing bench testing, yes, technically it's a better camera. But in terms of what you're going to see, no, sorry, it's not, okay? It's just not. So fail and conquer, what you really have to look at is, do you find yourself consistently running into situations where you're unable to do what you want? And the problem is your gear, not your own knowledge of photography, okay? If that's the answer, well, then you should be looking at the new gear. If that's not the answer, then, you know, you're better off with what you have, and you're going to make more money if you're shooting professionally because you're not wasting your overhead. You know, we have to understand that most of these fanboys, and I'm not, guys, please be clear, I'm not saying the fanboy thing to be derogatory. I have said it time and time and time again. Sony is making great gear. Sony is winning the race. Sony has handled everything about what they're doing brilliantly. And the fact that Sony has fanboys, that is to their credit. That is absolutely to their credit, okay? But that being said, you know, part of that fanboy culture, which is something that was started by Apple, is the idea that people are just rabid for whatever the company can put out. And they will change because of that. It's not making photography better. It's not making their photography better. And the fact of the matter is, in the case of photography, not so much phones, because that's a whole different monster, but in the case of photography, most of these people that are willing to do that, they are not working professionals that are paying their bills with those cameras. Because, I'm sorry, gang, the simple fact is, if you are running a business, upgrading your camera every year to a year and a half because the company came out with the newer one that's got a few more megapixels, an extra stop or two of dynamic range, and a few other features like better battery life, that's bad business. That is business done for fun, i.e. no profit. Because you're blowing that profit in buying those new cameras all the time. And, you know, the simple reality of it is, gang, don't take my word for it. What the hell do I know? I'm some guy on YouTube. Look at the photographers that make the big bucks, shooting the big ad campaigns, working in New York and that kind of stuff. Half the time, these guys, they own like a Canon or a Nikon body, but when they shoot a job, they go out and they rent a Phase 1 for a day or 2 days. That's it. In fact, frequently, they don't even rent the camera. What do? They hire a digital tech. The digital tech shows up with the camera, the computer, the digital cart, and everything. They use that camera, boom. That's it. The client pays for the rental. Everybody's happy. The photographer has no overhead on gear. The photographer doesn't have to go out and spend $60,000 on a camera body or $3,000 on a camera body. So you have to understand that, there's a big difference between, I shoot a wedding here and I shoot a wedding there. I'm not saying that person's not a professional, but that's not a professional that's paying their bills. When you look at the high-end people that are shooting with those $60,000 cameras, most of the time they don't own those cameras. Because you're going to spend $60,000 for a camera and the company comes out with a new camera, even if they wait 5 years. Even if they wait 5 years to come out with that new camera, you're losing money if you own it. So from a business standpoint, you can't justify those kind of expenses. And for me, gang, that's a big part of where I'm at with this process is realizing that I'm chasing gear. And I've been guilty, not guilty to the extent that Sony has managed to get their followers to do, but I've been guilty. Nikon comes out with a new camera. The DA50 is the first jump I have not made when Nikon came out with a new camera. Now, of course, Nikon doesn't come out with cameras, quite as fast as Sony's doing, et cetera. But the point is, they did it, and I jumped. So again, there's no judgment here. I'm not talking down to anybody. I'm just saying, hey, look, it's kind of time for me. It's really a matter of a bit of a reckoning, because you reach a point where you have to kind of step back and say, wait, what are we doing? At the upper echelon of the business, people lease cameras. People rent cameras. And the client pays for that. And those are the people that are making the real money, the really good money as photographers. So, that's the thing that you gotta be looking at this in a big picture. I'm not trying to take anything away from Sony. Again, I've said this like 3 times tonight. Great gear, great company, brilliant marketing, all of that stuff. Okay, but you really have to get back. I guess my point, gang, is ask yourself one simple question, or I should say, answer yourself one simple question: why did you pick up the camera in the first place? If that's not the most important thing to you when it comes to photography today, you've probably made a wrong turn somewhere. Just saying. So, Thomas Palmer, what was wrong with the Pixel 2 Blue Shift? No, actually, so, I was talking earlier, and I'm guessing, Thomas, you heard one of these conversations where I'm also at a breaking point. Do I stick with Apple? Do I go back to Windows? What should I do with the phones, etc.? There was absolutely nothing wrong with the Pixel 2. The reason why I decided to go ahead and order the iPhone 10 and stick with Apple at this point really had to do with, one, the nuisance that it would be to learn a new system in a new environment, and two, the breaking point actually was realizing that I have a lot of actually very expensive apps that I use on the iPhone that I will not just be able to transfer over to the Android, that I would have to buy them again. And that was enough to say, you know what? I don't need to move. The blue tint shift thing on the Pixel thing, that's highly overblown. Highly overblown. Okay. You've got to get that phone. I had one in my hand. I played with it. I compared it to the XL, looked at the 2XL, straight on, no problem whatsoever. You get it at a wonky angle. Yes, it does look blue compared to the XL, but how often do you look at your phone at a wonky angle? Like, who cares? Also, you have to understand that the whole color management process on that phone is very, very different than an iPhone or a Samsung phone or HTC or LG or any of those phones. I felt it was a great phone. I loved the feel of it. The size of it was beautiful. Weight of it, awesome. I actually loved the screen, and I loved the colors. The colors were much more real on that phone. Thought it was great. But at the end of the day, it actually came down to kind of just realizing that the price was, and the hassle of having to make the move. I decided not. And even with the computers and my debate between Mac and Windows, for now, I'm sitting tight. I was getting antsy, and I was going to go ahead and kind of get it out of the way and get the move over, but I'm going to sit tight. I'm not overly optimistic that Mac's going to get their act together, but I'm going to hope they do. So that's kind of where I'm at there. So Douglas Sanchez, what do I think about the Nikon D750? I want my first full frame for portraits and landscapes. You have the D5200. I think the 750 is a beautiful camera. I would say that in the Nikon line, it's actually a very underappreciated camera. It's more than enough pixels for what most people need. It's definitely a great, as you say, first full frame camera, but I think it's a full frame camera that can carry you forward for a long time. And fingers crossed, if you do the hard work and you progress and you start making money and you decide you want to upgrade beyond that, the D750 would be a great backup to a D810 or D850. So it's not the kind of camera where the minute you upgrade, it's going to become pretty much worthless to you. It would be an outstanding backup camera for, an 810 or an 850. So yeah, I think it's, great camera. But again, Doug, if you're in a country where you can rent, like here in the US, rent it, try it out. I would, highly encourage that. I told you guys I rented this Olympus that I'm trying out right now. I use lensrentals.com. True story. First time ever in my life I've rented a camera, and lensrentals.com, they were awesome to work with. Super simple, great. I've been very, very pleased. Okay. So, Gil, well, that is a big question. It was never about a brand for me. It was about capturing my art. So it's hard to make sure you're getting what you want and what you're losing with equipment when you switch. Yeah. And that's why, if you can rent it, try it out first. Totally the way to go. So, Peter Anderson, I really appreciate the kind words. Thank you so much, man. Okay. So let's see. Photo Trekker, love the A9 and the A7R3, but stick with the A7 II and A7R2 for a while. Yeah, I mean, come on, Photo Trekker. And seriously, I'm not trying to talk you out or talk down, the A7R3, but the A7 II and the A7R2, like, that's nothing to throw mud at, man. That's two really sweet cameras. So yes, the Sean Vine, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I get that pizza now. All right. So Photo Trekker, I mean, that A7R3, it's beautiful. I got to see it. I got to hold it at Photo Plus the other week. Obviously, my buddy Manny Ortiz, he's in love with it, man. And I know Manny's going to do some great stuff with it. Okay. It's a sweet camera. But, you got it. Let's face it, he's also a Sony, collective ambassador. Okay. So he's also supposed to like them. But come on, man. Those two cameras that you're talking about there, they are great cameras. I've used them both. Awesome cameras. So if you're smart, you're going to be looking at that A7R3 and saying, okay, at $3,000, even if I'm going to sell off one of the others, you're still going to have to put some money. So you got to be saying, okay, what am I getting for that money that is really going to impact me? While there are some definite convenience factors, battery life, that kind of stuff with the A7R3, to me, I don't see that improving the quality of photography or the quality of life that much for people to use in the A7R2. But there are a lot of Sony users that would disagree with me. So, I would say to you, hey, if you are happy, then, go for it. Gil, if you're asking what Olympus model am I looking at? This is the OMD EM1 Mark II. Sorry for stumbling through that. I'm still getting used to all the Olympus names. It's kind of like Canon with all the 5D Mark this and that. Al Lipscomb, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. It's their top of the line. It's their 20 megapixel, really sweet camera. Again, I can't say enough. I'm really, really impressed with it. So, Chip O'Neill, Manny does do nice work. No, he doesn't. Manny does awesome work, man. He does. Seriously, Manny's wickedly talented. I hate him just a little bit. He knows I would say that though. So, Manny's a great guy. I got at Photo Plus. I finally got him good though. Like, the thing you don't know about Manny, he's starting to come out of his shell in his videos, but he's always kind of quiet and reserved in his videos. So I had met him last year out in Las Vegas and ran into him at Photo Plus, but he had his wife Diana with him. So Manny came over to say hi, and I pretty much brushed him right off. It's like, finally, Diana, it's really great to meet you. So him and I got off to a really good start because I was giving him a really hard time. It's like, look, dude, I don't care about you. I met you already. It's like, I want to meet your wife, So, but yeah, Manny will do great work with a Sony. He's going to do great work with whatever he shoots with. So, I mean, that's the great thing about being talented. So he will do fine. Okay. Samuel, we're going to make this my last one. Shocker. I'm way over time. That never happens, does it? So what do you recommend for a beginning photographer with a crop sensor, a Canon T70i, to start a studio in his garage? Honestly, Samuel, if you're doing the kind of pictures that you like doing, start with that T7i. Because before I give you an answer, which it's hard to give you an answer just like that. So maybe you want to join my group and we can try and help you some more with this conversation. But the other thing, oh, is he here? Well, good. So he heard that then. There's nothing there that I said that I wouldn't mind Manny hearing. Don't worry. Okay. Manny knows that I'm a big fan. It's all good. So, Samuel, to give you that answer, a big part of it depends on, what lenses do you already have? You're going to start a studio. Even, I don't care if it's in your garage. Mine's in my basement. But the question is, like, are you going to have to buy a lot of lighting equipment? So there's kind of a lot of things that you want to factor into that. So yes, that's considered kind of a prosumer camera. So from the geartographer standpoint, even from the boys with toys standpoint, would it be cool to go out and get a bigger, better camera? Sure. But you kind of got to look at all of your budget considerations at the same time and look at what glass you have. I would want to see you put more emphasis on good glass than worrying about upgrading your camera, unless you are finding that there are things that you just can't get done with that camera that you need a better camera for. And that's really what's going to kind of drive you. So hope you like pics. What do I think about the Sony RX10 IV CyberShot high zoom 20 minutes? I'm not going to lie to you. I know very little about it, but I will tell you everything I've heard about it. It's like an amazing little camera. But I would encourage you talk a little bit more to people that are like, kind of the diehard Sony users. Because I don't, this is more gear than I've ever talked about tonight. You guys know I avoid the gear stuff. For me, photography is about the practice. It's about doing photography. No disrespect to the people that talk about gear. It's just, I know my gear. And that's where I put my focus. So I don't want to send you down a bad path. But all I can say is, honestly, everything I've ever heard about it, very, very impressive. Okay. Thomas Palmer, I'm not going to do the gallery and artist question tonight, but I promise you this. Next week, I will delve into that for you. I can give you some background on that. I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I can give you kind of the basics and also point you in the direction of some really good resources if that's something that you're interested in. So, and Germano, I'll talk about the creativity piece too. Okay? All right, gang. So listen, I want to say thank you all for hanging out tonight. You know what? I also want to thank you too. I was really worried about answering Troy's question and getting into the gear stuff because gear stuff tends to start arguments and all that. Everybody was really well behaved tonight. Thank you. Okay. The best gear is the gear that you're happiest with. It's the gear that you have, the gear that you can afford. And honestly, the best gear is knowing that what's good for you is not necessarily good for everybody else. And that's why you never hear me say, you have to use this, period. Okay. So, thank you, gang. All right. Have a great week. Please, most importantly, all this gear talk, all it does for me is it wants me to go out and take pictures. So get out there and shoot. I hope to see you guys next week here for TogChat. I'd love to see you in the group if you're not in the group. And make sure you keep your eyes out for part 2 of the tripod video set. I'm going to tell you about what brand of tripods I went with and which models. And I'm going to tell you about those really, really awesome ball heads from Acrotech. So until then, gang, please remember these words. Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now go pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.